So thanks for being here for our final session of the day. As you can see, it's headlined Communications and Education. But when I first saw the topics that Wayne and the team had assigned us, I thought Wayne's love of research was kind of taking over because he kept sticking research in the title for this talk. But then I realized that, as usual, Wayne was showing some wisdom, and that is that when we think about communicating about soil health or educating about soil health, you know, it so often starts with research. And even more importantly, it starts with farmers and ranchers and what we can learn from them in the process of research. So we're kind of going to be coming at this idea of how research integrates with education and integrates with communication throughout this session in some different ways. So I was asked to kind of kick this off with a short set of remarks about what we've learned in the SARE program, the USDA Sustainable Ag Research and Education Program, over 30 years of making grants in this area. And it's definitely a big part of what SARE is all about. If you're not real familiar with SARE, we're a $35 million program, and farmers and ranchers are a huge focus and really the principal focus for our program. And lesson number one that we've learned as we've worked with these thousands of projects over the years is that farmer involvement increases the odds of asking the right question in research and achieving an outcome that has impact. You know, we're all looking for a good outcome, but asking that right question is really important. And I'll just give you a personal example from my own background. If I go back 35 years ago, it's kind of scary to think it's been that long since I started doing research in graduate school. And I was really interested, you know, growing up on a farm and how the plants grow. You know, you see all these millions of corn and soybean plants around you, and exactly how is it they grow and produce this food we eat. So I said, okay, I'm going to learn about crop physiology. So working with my master's advisor, he was really interested in how soybean flowers developed and what kept some of them from developing into seeds. And so we came up with this experiment where we were working in a growth chamber. We had fiber optic lights going all over the place in the growth chamber. Some of them were shining red wavelengths, some were shining far red wavelengths. And I go home at Christmas and I'm telling my dad about this experiment, and he kind of looks at me for a minute, doesn't say anything. He says, "How am I ever going to use that in my soybean field?" He's thinking about these fiber optic lights and red and far red. And I kind of thought about that over the Christmas break, and I thought, you know, basic science is great, but that's maybe not where I want to be at in impacting farmers and ranchers going forward. So it really kind of actually changed the whole course of my career, and I became much more focused on the applied aspects of serving farmers and got involved with farming systems research, where we actually went out and interviewed farmers during my PhD program, both members of the farm couple, what are the challenges you're facing? This is during the farm financial crisis, and use that to kind of guide some of the university research we were doing. So that right question is really important. Now in SARE, we do have a very diverse portfolio of projects we fund. Soil health is certainly a big part of what we do. Cover crops, probably the single biggest area we've put funding into. I think we funded something like 800 projects on cover crops out of the 6,000 that we funded. We fund projects through 4 regions of the country, and each region has a slightly different approach to grant making, but they all have some common elements. We all do grants that are called research and education grants. We all have grants for graduate students. We all have grants that are more or less partnerships among farmers and advisors, ones for professional development, and actually ones to farmers and ranchers. And this is my personal favorite, is the Farmer Rancher program. So I want to tell you just briefly more about how we work with farmers through these projects. So the 3 that focus the most on farmer involvement, again, starting with the Farmer Rancher one, we've done over 3,000 of these now. And among all the different USDA grant programs, we're the only one that funds research directly to farmers. I mean, yes, there are other USDA grant projects that sometimes involve farmers, but as far as giving the money directly to a farmer and saying, it's your idea, what do you want to test on your farm or ranch? This is the program that does it. We also have these research and education grants that have had a lot of producer involvement, over 1,500 of those, and over 500 partnership grants, which is a little newer grant program for us. So you put those 5,000 projects together, and yes, we have learned some things about how farmer and researcher interaction should be happening. And just briefly, just a little bit more about these research and education ones, which are our biggest. These usually have both integrated research and education, and we really stress that the farmers and ranchers not only just need to be involved at all stages of the project, but they also need to be helping with the research, design, and evaluation of the results. So sometimes I'm talking to a younger researcher, maybe somebody that's very well trained in research, but they just haven't worked really closely with farmers before. And they'll say, okay, well, I can take this great idea I have, and I can find a farmer and I can get one of their fields and I'll go put it out in their field, maybe on nutrient management. Well, you know, that's great. That's probably better than just doing it on a university farm. But what we really want is for that researcher to say, you know, I want to better understand nutrient management, but I need to talk to the farmers to understand what's important about it for them. What will I be able to learn that will be helpful to them in improving their operation? You know, how can I do the research in a way that they'll be able to adopt the results? We want that early stage input from the farmers, and we want them involved at every step of the process. Our newer program with partnerships, these are a little bit smaller, 15 to 50,000 per region. We have an ag professional, which could be an extension agent, a crop consultant, really any type of person working in ag. And they typically would involve 3 or more farmers. And here we're looking for some collective wisdom. You know, this group of farmers is saying, you know, in our area, we're a little bit struggling with how to use cover crops for grazing, or we're trying to figure out how to deal with a particular pest problem. And we'd like to work on this collectively. So here's our idea, and then they're working with that ag professional to kind of get it down on paper, and that ag professional helps manage some of the financial aspects of the project. So that's another way we integrate farmers and researchers. So some of the lessons we've learned from that, just to hit these very briefly, I think one is that the producer involvement can lead to more meaningful research design, but as I just mentioned, it really needs to happen early in the process. I just have seen that mistake too many times, that the researcher completely designs the experiment and then they talk to the farmer. We really want that to occur earlier before that design is finalized. Secondly, we'd like to see regular input from the producers because it's valuable to make sure that that approach being research will be practical on the farm. Just like my dad didn't really see the application of fiber optic lights in his soybean field, we need to make sure that we're doing something that can be adopted. And of course, farmers are great about thinking what's going to work with their equipment and operation. You know, farmers are also really good about identifying what else needs to be figured out. After this experiment's done, what's the next thing we need to know to improve this approach even further or to understand it better? And then finally, I think on-farm and ranch research, especially with producers involved in the process, can lead to more creative solutions. I think we've all seen, and some of us have a farm background, that farmers are great problem solvers, not just with figuring out how to make their equipment work, but just figuring out how to make new approaches work on the farm or ranch. So we want to use that creativity as part of the research process and figuring out how to make this approach really work in our operations. So those are a few lessons we've learned. I wanted to come back, though, to communications and outreach, since that's part of what we're talking about this afternoon. So we most often find, and we always require some outreach component to our research projects, that ends up being a field tour or pasture walk. And we've all enjoyed, you know, going out on some of those. But there's an art to designing those effectively, and part of it is making sure we're getting some farmer to farmer or rancher to rancher learning. You know, farmers learn best from other farmers, and it's really important that they have a chance to get their questions asked. That's something I've noticed working in extension. You can't just go out and give a 30-minute talk and expect somebody to make a major change in their operation. They need to have that chance to ask the questions about, how is this going to fit my operation? Or you as another farmer that's done this, you know, what did you do in this situation? So that chance to interact and ask questions like we get more informally in a field tour or pasture walk is really critical to the success of bringing that research into adoption. I'll just end with this slide, a couple relatively new resources we have through SARE you might be interested in. One is a new bulletin on how to conduct research on your farm or ranch. That just came out in the last year or so. It's about a 30-page bulletin. It has some several different farmer examples of research they're doing on farm, provides some methodology, and it's appropriate not just for a farmer, but also a farm advisor that might be working for them. You can get either of these publications at SARE.org. Just when you go to that website, look at our Learning Center books and bulletins. And then we also have a relatively new book on systems research for agriculture that kind of dives into when we're taking this broader systems perspective and integrating the producer into the process of designing the research and thinking about our outcomes. How do we do that appropriately? So that's a little bit longer publication, about 100 pages. You can get it free online as a PDF, or you can order a copy for a modest charge. So just a couple relatively new resources.